Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome. My name is Will. I'm relatively new to Stannary Street. I'll be hosting tonight. We're thrilled to be joined by Eric Kientzler of Domaine Kientzler in Alsace. Hi, Eric.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Bit of housekeeping. Please do put any questions you might have in the chat. And our final wine tonight, as I think you know, is a blind wine. So we'll ask you to guess what that might be again in the chat. Don't worry, no stupid guesses, no such thing as a stupid question. I'm sure a lot of you, and this includes Eric, keen to watch the football later. I know I am. We will be wrapping up by 8 o'clock. You might miss the anthems, but we have a treat in store first. Wines with the precision of hurricanes, finishing as energetic as Raheem Sterling and at least as complex as the task facing Denmark tonight. So Eric, let's take it away. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about the history of the domain to begin with.
So, Domaine Kientzler is now the 5th generation. I'm working with my brother Thierry. And so, yes, we have 5th generation at least. We are producing wines, but we have a vineyard for longer than that. And so we are located in Ribeauvillé, so right in the middle of Alsace. And we've got about 14 hectares, but just in the surroundings of Ribeauvillé. So in about 4 kilometers around, we've got all our vineyard. So we are not spread in all Alsace. We will focus on the Ribeauvillé area.
Right. Well, personally, I dislike tastings where you have to sit for ages without tasting any wine. So let's begin with the Pinot Blanc. And perhaps you can tell us a bit about this wine specifically, but also tell us what for you is special about Alsace generally, but also Ribeauvillé, where you're based in particular.
So the Pinot Blanc you will taste it is for me is the perfect entrance to Alsace wine. It's because of the fruitiness of the grape, of the balance of the acidity of the body. For me, it got all together, but equal balance. So it's a perfect wine for instance for aperitif or to match with food. So for that balance, for me, the Pinot Blanc should be much known for this quality. And so the things with this Pinot Blanc, we actually use only the grape Auxerrois. In Alsace, we have 2 varieties of Pinot Blanc allowed. So Pinot Blanc, of course, and Pinot Auxerrois. Those 2 varieties, Pinot Blanc has more acidity, and Auxerrois is more round in the texture. But because our vineyard in Ribeauvillé area, and Ribeauvillé area made wines really sharp and with intense acidity. So to balance the wines and to have more like a regular Pinot Blanc, we prefer to use Auxerrois with less acidity in our terroir of Ribeauvillé with higher acidity. So that makes more equal balance.
Why does Ribeauvillé produce wines with such high acidity?
For me, the biggest influence is from the valley. We have a valley, d'Aubure. The name is Aubure. And it's about, we have mountains close to 1,000 meters high. It's not that huge, but the valley have huge influence because there are many forests at the top. And in spring and summer, during that time, about from 6 o'clock until the night, the wind go down the valley and blow in the vineyard in Ribeauvillé. That's really important to refresh the area, to keep the acidity. And this year, because it's not finished yet, but it's really high pressure of mildew nowadays. We never saw that, to be honest, that level of pressure, so that maybe will destroy a bit or more the crops. But in Ribeauvillé, the mildew pressure is a bit lower due to the wind. We have it, but in other vineyards it's much more terrible than us, because it's more closed, like cover without winds. So when we talk about terroir, we often talk about the ground, sun exposition, but not forget the wind influence. That's really critical as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about winemaking at the estate?
Yeah, so the winemaking, we use only a stainless steel tank. The idea for that is to be really pure and precise. We don't want that the container interfere into the wine, even if that could be for good reason. Burgundy wines make that perfectly, but our goal, our focus is to restitute the best way as we can either the purity of the fruit, like a regular Pinot Blanc, or the purity of minerality for Riesling or for Grand Cru, Lieu-dit or Grand Cru in general. So, and my opinion that the wood bring a lot of character and texture and length to the wine, but at least for Alsace, for what I understood of minerality and terroir for Alsace wine, may interfere. But that's just an idea, not about the quality of the wine.
I should say at this point, we have stock of all the wines we're tasting this evening available to sell. We also have a couple of wines that Eric makes that we're not going to have the chance to taste, including a fabulous Crémant. Unfortunately, the people who put these little cases together couldn't do a sparkling wine. But next year, if you come over, Eric, and do this in person, we'll kick off with the Crémant.
Okay.
So our second wine, Pinot Gris. And already we're on to a Grand Cru, Osterberg. Perhaps you could tell us about Osterberg, but I know I'm curious to get your take on what makes Alsatian Pinot Gris different from Pinot Gris grown elsewhere in the world.
So first of all, Osterberg in Ribeauvillé area, we've got 3 different Grand Cru. The first one is Osterberg, about 25 hectares size. Then the Kirchberg, about 13 hectares, and the Geisberg, about 8 hectares. During about 40 years ago, when we decided about a Grand Cru appellation, my father and other winemaker in Ribeauvillé were really implicated to separate the 3 Grand Cru and not make a big one just with one name. And so that's why we have quite small Grand Cru vineyard, but really distinct by sun exposition and minerality texture. So that's the first most important things. Because the Osterberg is mainly, as the name mentioned, is southeast sun exposition, and the tip of soil is a bit of blend of marl, limestone, and sandstone. But the thing about that blend, it's like a common blend through the Grand Cru Alsace area. So the Kirchberg and Geisberg are more specific into that. So the Osterberg for me will restitute like more classical minerality to the wine and more with more linear perception. And that's really interesting for that. And to go back to your question about Pinot Gris. In Alsace, we have the freedom to make Pinot Gris, I mean, as we want. It could be really dry, or often it could be sweet or really sweet. It's long story about that regulation, but and often the Pinot Gris we look for a bit of over ripeness, because Pinot Gris is a grape that high acidity level, a bit lower than the Riesling, but perception of acidity of Pinot Gris could be really, really high. So, so that one, a bit over ripeness, make much more gentle fruit, soften a bit the acidity, and then the sweetness make the balance really, really pleasant. But at the end, for me, we lost the gastronomic balance. And specifically when you are a dry wine amateur, it's nice to taste it, to have a glass, but not a bottle. So nowadays we really focus to have maybe less glamour wine, but more focused wine. And so that's really the idea with our Pinot Gris nowadays.
And which of the cuvées, which of the grapes across the domain is harvested first? What's the order typically?
So except the sparkling, could be really different. Often we can start with Auxerrois. So Pinot Blanc, you taste it because we want to keep the freshness. And it's not necessary to go super ripe. Then it could be Gewürztraminer as well. Depend of the yield, and because for Gewürztraminer we want just a bit of sweetness, but really not that much. So we are often the first in our area to pick the Gewürztraminer, and then could be Sylvaner, some Pinot Gris, and Muscat. But it could be really changing, and sometimes Riesling could be happen really early, or in some years you can have it's really later than the other grapes. Generally, Riesling is the latest grape, but in some year, because of the yield is really low, we can go before.
When do you expect to start harvesting this year?
This year, I think we expect harvesting middle of September for the sparkling. So maybe third week of September for the still wine, but it depends of the back season of the summer. But for sure, it was at least 3 weeks later than last year.
Okay. Well, I know you don't have any of this 2016 Pinot Gris Osterberg left, do you? We've taken it all. So you'll have to trust us, it's showing really well.
Yeah, it's but I give you all my bottle left when you ask it for that. It's so yeah, you tell me how you taste the wine, because me, I'm not.
It's in a good place. Some nice complexity, but still really fresh. You know, superb.
It's now how we manage the Pinot Gris. So the Osterberg is without malolactic fermentation, so it's really, really sharp and intense. But now what we try to do, I don't know if this is the best way to do, but we use a bit more the Pinot Gris, the Grand Cru Geisberg, but we do malolactic fermentation just to soften a bit the acidity of the Pinot Gris. So on the 16, the vintage was quite soft in acidity. It was a fresh vintage, but not extremely acid. And now it's 16, so I think the acidity balance is really, really drinkable. But maybe in the early stage, it was a bit sharp. And what we do is more like with our Pinot Gris, more like a Burgundy style, without barrique, but doing just when it's ripe. We don't look for over ripeness. It's ripe. We pick it, do malolactic fermentation to just soften a bit. And
well, related to that, actually, to the ripeness level, I've got a question from my colleague Kim, who claims to have sold a lot of this. I'm sure she has. What's the residual sugar on this, and is the 16 typical of the cuvée in terms of residual sugar?
No, for Pinot Gris, Geisberg, we never been that dry. So yeah, it's I think about 3 grams regular sugar. I just have the list to don't make. It's 4 grams. 4 grams of regular sugar. And
given what you said before, is it fair to say that your wines have less residual sugar than your father's would have?
For the Pinot Gris, I will say yes. Yeah. We already has dry Pinot Gris for entry level, but for the Grand Cru now, I think we're drier than our father before. Yes.
I suggest we move on to the first Riesling of the evening. We've got the Ribeauvillé 2018. So if you could tell us a bit about this cuvée, and it might be a good opportunity to speak a little bit about recent vintages. We've had 2 16s so far. Now we have an 18. And perhaps if you could tell us a bit about 19 and 20 as well, which we have actually shipped another cuvée of Riesling 2020. So
you want I first talk about vintage?
Tell us a bit about the Ribeauvillé to begin with.
So Ribeauvillé wine, so it's like a second level range of wine. So we have more like a regular Riesling. So Ribeauvillé is another selection, it's a level of Riesling we have. So it's from the entry level, so it's different vineyard. All Riesling we have, the quality different just come from the vineyard and not about the vinification process or longer aging, lease contacts or whatever. It's just the land effects. So Ribeauvillé just come from the hills. We are surrounding Ribeauvillé, obviously. And we have as well Grand Cru declassified into that wine. Why we do that is because you can have a younger vine or another selection of plant. The selection, we don't talk about that. We don't have the time, I think, but the selection we plant is really important. And sometimes historically, we have maybe a selection that's not as good as it should be. And so we can declassify, or a part of a Grand Cru that in some reason, in some vintage, may have less potential than the other part, so we declassify. So it's quite, quite engagement into the wine, really good land. And so we focus. It has much more wider minerality compared to the first level Riesling. The acidity is much more integrated because you have more body into the wine. And to explain a bit the label, so the label of Riesling Ribeauvillé, actually, so the black is the town, and all the color you see, it's every color is another kind of soil, because the things important to know about Ribeauvillé is we have a huge crack that fragment the soils from Saint-Hippolyte to Geisberg, so about 30 kilometers distance. That crack is called crack of Ribeauvillé, and you have almost all type of soils existing in the world, and that's quite unique in Europe. We have 2 areas. You have Barolo in Italy, that in just small place with that diversity, and Alsace. So, and all that color show why we have so much difference of taste of Riesling or wines in Alsace, because of those kind of lands.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the label and of the wine, everything about the wine, actually. I love this cuvée. Just tell us briefly about recent vintages. We don't need to go back too far, but 2018 in comparison to 16, and then perhaps also compared to 19 and 20.
So we go back and up. So 16 is a fresh vintage, but well balanced in a way. It's so the acidity is here, but is high, but ripe, soft and ripe. The yield was just okay, not too much yield. So it's, for me, it's like I maybe don't have the English for that, but something a bit like in the, I mean, more light, gentle vintage, really well balanced vintage, really drinkable, even when it's a bit in the early stage. So, and then if we move slowly to 17 is really different vintage, is really low yield, and in that vintage everything is extreme. In 17 you have extreme as not maybe extreme, but really high acidity, really high concentration, high bitterness. So it's powerful vintage. 17 is a powerful vintage. And when we move to the 18 is a yield with a big yield. So the important part of culture during this vintage was to manage the yield. So to be really severe in the vineyard, to remove a lot during the spring, to not have too much grapes in the field. So it makes much more gentle, soft, fruity vintage compared that the two other. I think easy drinking. Of course, on the Grand Cru you have the salinity, but yeah, I think easy drinking vintage compare. And then 19 we go back to something close to 17. Again, quite precise, intense, and again low yield production of wine. So and the 20 is about between 16 and 17. So still good balance as well. So.
Well, it's going to be very interesting then to taste the next wine, which is a 17 vintage. You've just described as very concentrated. Before we do that, a question from Alice: Is there a region or perhaps another winemaker who's really influenced you?
I think the question has to be asked to my brother, because the winemaker is my brother. So I can't answer for him, but I think globally the influence it's could be at every steps, because every vintage we don't follow a recipe. We try new thing in the vineyard, in the cellar. For instance, malolactics, is that something we never use it, but we try to use it a bit more, depend to the vintage, to soft a bit the acidity. The thing is, nowadays, wine have to be, and Grand Cru as well, wine have to be perfect young and perfect 20 years later. So it's quite tricky, because now journalists ask for young vintage, so they judge the vintage young, and the consumer as well, because sometimes the Grand Cru can be said quite young. And then in the meantime, some amateur keep the wine 5, 10, 20 years. So with all that aspect, you have to change about our feeling of the wine, to listen, and the vintage, of course. We know, for instance, that this vintage 21, if we have grapes to harvest, will be, I think, quite intense with acidity level. So we have to be carefully already of that. So to be really precise on maturity and vinification. But
that's a very interesting point you make, that wines really do need to be approachable, young, as well as being age worthy now, and that's certainly the case in the UK market. Well, let's move on to the 2017 Geisberg. We've got a series of wines from this very famous Grand Cru. So tell us a bit about Geisberg, if you would.
So Riesling Geisberg is our flagship wines. So it's so the history of the Geisberg. So it's just 8.5 hectares. We're only 4 producer of the Geisberg, and so it's south-facing vineyard, really steep, in terraces, cultivated in terraces. So no tractors can go into that vineyard. So it's really, really challenging vineyard. And the story behind that Grand Cru is almost half of the Grand Cru is owned by the church of Ribeauvillé. And the reason for that is in the old days, I mean, in the 20th centuries or maybe 19th centuries, a lot of plot of the Grand Cru Geisberg were given to the church because sometimes if you need assistance or medicine, the church have that in that time has that knowledge. If your daughter went to the church to stay her life to the church, you have to give a gift to the church, and often a lot of land of the church was the Geisberg because it was too tricky to walk, and we don't have all this Grand Cru appellation that time. And I think a lot of people give his land to the church. So now they own half of the Grand Cru. And my brother and I, we thanks our grandparents, grandparents, because we own 1.5 of the Grand Cru Geisberg, so quite a lot compared to the size of the Grand Cru. And just thanks to our grandparents, because they cultivate the land and don't give to the church for any reason or to someone else. So I think it was it's still really hard work, but we thank them for that.
So why is it so hard to farm Geisberg?
I think Geisberg need at least 3 times more works than every other vineyard. So instead, it's like if we have about 5 hectares of another regular land. It's because it's really steep. So no tractors can go into it. So you have to use a lot of things by hand or with another specific tool, really compact. So it's really slow. We have big walls. We have to renovate it. So it's a lot of extra work. And so every work takes a very long time. So, but we don't complain because of the wine, but it's huge organization for our part. Yes.
Well, Richard comments that this 2017 is delicious, concentrated and smooth, which I would certainly agree with. I wanted to ask briefly about the effects of climate change, I suppose particularly regarding the Grand Crus, which have historically been warmer sites where the grapes would best ripen.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, about the global warming, I think we are still a lot of things to learn and to see about the effect in the vineyard. But what I can say about the Geisberg, so it's the sunniest vineyard we have, not necessarily the warmest, but still quite warm, and because of the wind in France specifically. But still, it's generally it's every year, even it's really warm year, it's our best vine. So I often talk with other winemakers. I say, global warming. I say, but why the Geisberg is still the best wine we produce, even in the warmest year. So of course, the global warming has an influence, but every really good land has something to won't be destroyed by the global warming. It will be a matter of maturity, not to go too high in concentration, but the global warming affects every land. And maybe I'm wrong in 30 years, we will see, but I don't think if the area is cool or north facing will be the future for Alsace wine. Maybe in 50 years, maybe in 1 century, but or maybe not. But at least for the 20, 30 years coming, the best land we have now will be still the best in a close future. And to answer of what we can do about that, what we try to say is to keep the grass, but not necessarily that vintage, but to keep the grass grow. First, of course, to keep the flowers and to the pollination of every plant, and to have a cover on the soil. So because if you cut the grass, of course, the heat, the sun will dryer the soil with most influence. The grass after will grow again and will pump the water in the soil. So we can do that. We can leave a bit more leaves to cover the grapes. So it's many things to see. Of course, try maybe new selection, but that's really another story.
Oh, well, that 17 is tasting really well, and I'm confident it's going to be even better in a few years' time. It really is very tightly wound, as you said about the vintage. We'll move on to the 13. Perhaps you could, I know gastronomy is very important to you, Eric. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about, well, the regional cuisine of Alsace and what you enjoy eating with these wines at the various stages in their evolution.
But if we talk about Alsace gastronomic cuisine, is not with necessarily that kind of food I will drink. For instance, the Riesling we have now. I really love Riesling, the Riesling Grand Cru with raw fish, or smoked salmon, and something really elegant, precise food. And for me, often the texture of the fish works perfectly with the acidity of Riesling can have. And that could be a terrific match. Or what I've experimented is, of course, you have seafood like oyster, and I do have a Riesling Grand Cru. Maybe it was Riesling Osterberg 2002, about a year ago, and the wine was good, but a bit oxidized, a bit not necessarily oxidized, but a bit stronger evolution than expected. But the taste of the wine was here, the acidity was here, but it was a bit sad for the wine. But in the meantime, I have oyster, so I eat my oyster, and still I have my glass on, and I drink the wine. And the refreshing of the oyster was so strong that perfectly matched with the Riesling was a bit over edge for the vintage. And it was the last perfect combination I tasted. So it was really explore my mind, because I really don't expect that. I was a bit sad of the wine. I said, just another sip. And that combination was perfect. So it's easy for you. You have that things. You have old Riesling, a bit maybe too old. But if you have oyster, I suggest you to try.
Love to. Kim's suggesting tarte flambé. Maybe she's stereotyping a bit.
Yeah, we start flambé. I will go. It's my feeling with the Pinot Blanc. I will something simple, fruity. We start flambé. I don't want minerality. If you enjoy, of course, I think you can do, but I think you will lose a bit the wine, like heavy food, fondue or stuff like that. You will lose the wine, because tarte flambé could be quite creamy, quite heavy in a way, and you need a refreshing wine, Pinot Blanc, whatever. But I won't use a Grand Cru for that.
Certainly very, very versatile food matches, be it with shellfish or sushi or meat, I guess, too. Lovely. 13. You've got the 13, I hope. There, yeah.
Yes. So the Geisberg 13. Yes.
What are the aromas you expect as your wines, as your Rieslings, the Geisberg ages?
First, I expect and I hope that we have we have the higher freshness. So in some ways, still have the fruit and minerality get deep, but I say refreshing minerality. I don't look for a petroleum taste. Geisberg can have a bit underneath. I don't say you don't have, but just underneath. But when it's too typical, for me, the petroleum taste is more a more sunburnt influence. It's my feeling. We can talk many minutes about that, but what my feeling about that, because I tasted many wines and I know some culture, some vineyard, some winery on the culture they do, and why it's funny because why some wine are really petroleum, and with the same Grand Cru, one is petroleum, one is not, because one is from winery and one is not from the other winery. So petroleum taste for me is not a terroir effect, really more like a culture effect. And so yes, I expect for my wines, for other wines, to be really refreshing minerality. That's when you have that, for me, you reach the goal.
We'll move on to the 2011 shortly. Does the residual sugar level vary much from vintage to vintage with the Geisberg?
It's about generally between 1 and 4 grams, 2 and 3, but sometimes it can be 1, sometimes 4, but generally it's 2 or 3 grams residual sugar. And just one point for the 13, that one is extremely acid. So that is a really cool vintage. So really late picking. We start the picking, I think, in October. Or really late September. So all the Riesling were the second half of October. And so it's extremely acid. And now the acidity is really more digest, but because the wine is 8 years old. It's extremely acid, but in the meantime, really, really pure, I think. So it's really intense wine for that. So the recent vintage we have are not that feeling, but just something specific to the 13. So journalists don't make big review of the 13, but me, I really love the 13, specifically with a bit of edge, because it's so sharp and intense. Yeah.
It's remarkably youthful for a wine that's 8 years old. Absolutely. And how long does the Geisberg spend in tank? How long? What time? When do you bottle it?
So every bottling are done before the next harvest. So the wine is about 8 to 10 months in lees contact. So all the wines you tasted are aged in bottle.
Right, 2011.
So 2011 will be a completely different story. So this is Geisberg 11. It's a vintage that before we harvest our Grand Cru, first we did a first harvest in all the Grand Cru to remove all the ripe that get purple. I mean, we have some the bottle teeth starting quite early on unripe grape. So to let the other grapes ripe enough, because it was really on the early stage. So in all the Grand Cru vineyard, we have to go in first pick to remove all of that grapes. Even, for instance, a grape was only 10% attack, we cut it because 2 weeks or 3 weeks later will be completely attacked by the botrytis. So I don't mean the botrytis is bad, but if you want to make a dry wine, it's an issue. So and then is really concentrate, really powerful vintage by concentration, not necessarily by acidity, not at all, by the concentration was in the bitterness. So our challenge was to keep that as much as possible.
I think we can tell there that the acidity is lower than on the 13. Certainly doesn't lack for acidity though.
It cannot be higher than 13.
And do you anticipate botrytis being an issue this year, given how wet it's been?
It's too early now. The botrytis is the weather for the botrytis is important during the picking. It could be really wet now, and then it is really dry. It won't be influence at all. So the wet weather is for the disease now. That is really big issue. But for the botrytis is how the weather is doing the picking. It not to be necessarily wet, but it could be a morning drop. I don't know. The morning could be wet or
mist in the morning. Yeah,
and that's enough. And then really sunny and then hot. That make the process start.
Well, I'm curious if anybody would like to tell us if they have a preference between the Geisbergs we've tasted so far, the 3 vintages. All quite different, which is great. That was the objective. Sounds like 13 has a special place in your affections, Eric.
Yes, it's. But then it still depends of the group you're drinking. For instance, with my wife, she now is upset of Riesling. With my friends winemaker, we drink too much Riesling, and so she prefers when it's a bit more soft and mellow. So I want poor Riesling 13 with my wife. So I have to choose more soft, like a 12 Geisberg or something a bit, or 16 in a couple of years, but not 13, not 10 vintage.
Well, there's a couple of candidates here who would gladly drink the 13 with you, Richard and Tom, and then the 11. A relaxing drink, which I totally understand what Christopher means by that. Bit more approachable at present than the 13.
I agree.
Oh, good question from Kim. Where does the name Geisberg come from?
So Geisberg, you have one obvious meaning. It's so Berg is a mountain, and Geis might be la chèvre.
Goat.
Goat, yeah, the goat, and because in German, Geis is the goat. Mm-hmm. Or another meaning that quite and why goat? Because of course of the slopes of the Geisberg. And another meaning that is for me is really interesting is you have as well a Geist. I think G-E-I Geist S-T-H is the ghost.
Yes.
So it's not 100% sure which one is the meaning, but I think maybe it's more the Geist. But I still in my somewhere in my head that ghost it's part of the meaning of the Grand Cru.
This 11 really is super. Fascinating development, as Christopher says.
And that the wine now is 10 years old, and I don't know what you think about that, but it's the kind of aging I really enjoy, because now the wine is 10 years old, but I don't know how you taste it, but the bottle I open is really pure, really fresh. The Geisberg not makes the most impressive wines at first, but then it's really delicate, and when you think about the wine, it's really deep, and the minerality of a Geisberg is, for me, after you swallow the wine, just get bigger and bigger and bigger, but really smoothly and with high precision. For me, that characteristic of the minerality of the Geisberg. And then the freshness I have, what really I enjoy. We have not really fruit, but the wine is still fresh in the meantime, I think.
Yeah. Well, still got 13 minutes before kickoff, I'm pleased to say, and one more wine, which we've decided to serve blind. We consulted you, Eric, to pick an interesting vintage, something that should be showing well. I'm not going to say anything more about it. We'll taste it together, and you can have a go at guessing grape and the vineyard, and then we'll have a crack at vintage as well. I'm pleased to say we were given a more generous helping of this last wine, so we can toast England's goals. Might need a second bottle depending on how things go. Please, any comments about the blind wine in the chat? Don't feel obliged to guess, but we'd love to know if you like it. If you like it less than what we've tasted before.
Yeah, the color is. He has to, of course, wine with aging has a bit more darker yellow, and in the meantime would be as well about concentration at first.
Before you reveal what it is, perhaps tell us a bit about this vintage, Eric.
So this vintage, in some points, will be in a way similar to 11, but with higher freshness. Because I don't mention with 11, but we did, in 11 you can do really sweet wines. You can, because the botrytis happen quite easily. In some years, the botrytis don't arrive at all, and in other years you have a lot. So, and when you have that, of course, you can have higher sweetness level, and in that vintage, I almost say the vintage, but in that vintage, you have the botrytis happen, and so we did different Geisberg in this vintage. Now that one won't be the driest we did, but another one.
Yeah, so we have a bold guess here. Pinot Gris 2009. It's not, but
it could be a good guessing, but 9 is a vintage without botrytis. It was really warm and dry during the year, but as well during the harvest. So we have in 9 we have concentration, but about when the grapes get dry. The concentration is for the dryness, not for the botrytis.
Yeah, right to say that we're on a slightly older wine here than what we've tasted previously. It is a Riesling, and it is Geisberg.
Could be. Really close.
And yeah, it's in fact, this is from Magnum, so that may have had that will have had an impact on its evolution. Good guess from Christopher, 2005. Not quite right.
So 2005 was as well, yes, really really intense vintage with quite low yield, but with, I think, a bit less botrytis than this vintage. Is really close, of course, but I think now we are in the right spot, and so of course now with that vintage we completely changed the aromatic. With the 11, well, in some ways still really close or fresh Geisberg, but now it's completely another step. It's really tertiary
Tertiary,
aromatic.
yeah,
so the fruit is out. And now you really the dips of the minerality that just keeps the wines awake and standing. And
What
I
would
really
you pair
love.
this?
Pardon?
Sorry, Eric, go on.
No, please go.
What would you pair this with? What would you eat with this?
So that one I think is about 10 or a bit more grams of residual sugar. I think now with the age, about 15 years old, we don't really feel it. We feel a softer texture, but for me the softer texture is more about the aging process, because more the wine age and more the feeling of sweetness decline. So it's more the softened acidity that makes the texture. And for that kind of wine, I think you can have something quite refreshing with a higher acidity food. You can have some citrus, I think, in your dish. Not necessarily the younger Grand Cru, because you already have that citrus and porphyr feeling. So yeah, I mean, crevette. I don't know. With
prawns.
Asian cooking or with how to say gingembre that give the power.
Yeah, with ginger, super. Yeah, something quite aromatic. Well, Cade comments that the colour's comparable to a 2000 Dom Perignon. I assume that is open last weekend, but fails to say that this is far superior. But I'm sure that's the case. Sarah guesses late 90s. It's not as old as that. I think, yeah. So Christopher came very close. This is 2004. So thank you very much for sharing it with us, Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you happy with it?
Yeah, because of course now it's, as I say, it's completely different layers. So the freshness is gone, but we, at least I don't know the wine we have, but no oxidation at all. Really pure. So it's the color is strong, but for me it's more a color of the previous maturity, not of the, of course, of the aging. But if I have a dry Geisberg with that color, I say, it may be oxidized, but for me the color is really quite strong, but not oxidation at all. I don't know about you. You can say that.
Oh, no, absolutely no. And very interesting to see that, well, to experience the change in texture a bit as the wine ages.
But with the vertical we just done, it's, well, the consumer asked me when is the best time to drink the Grand Cru. It's a tricky question because of course it's different vintage, but every moment or aging have its own quality. And so I often to say until 10 years we can have freshness and minerality, but over 10 years we move more like this Geisberg 2004. But I don't know, it's just up to your taste. If you enjoy that aging, for me it's superb, but I just enjoy as well a 13 Geisberg now. So could be really different, of course, to the meal you have and the people around.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the 04 still has a lot of life left in it.
Yes. We did just maybe I forgot to bring the bottle, but during the Easter in last April we drank a Geisberg 50. And
how was that showing?
And actually I bring the bottle because I'm living in the house of my grandfather. We built his house at the bottom of the Geisberg, and so and the house was the cellar never changed. And I go down because we have the family, and I look at the bottle with a lot of dust, and I saw a Geisberg 50. I said, let's try with really all different label, and I poured the wine. It was really strong color. Of course, the texture, the acidity was really away. The density of the wine was really low, but the quality was the freshness. And we drank the bottle like that. So it wasn't the most impressive wine we have, but it was a lovely drinkable wines with, it was a lot of texture, tannins and layers, but no oxidation and really drinkable. So it was for me the best quality we can have. And so we enjoyed it. So it was quite unusual. I don't drink often that old Geisberg.
Well, Eric, this has been a fascinating, delicious tasting. Thank you very much. We'd love to do it again in person in London.
Yeah, much more fun.
Chapeau for the wines. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much to come to the tasting, and I hope you the best in the two coming hours with the football. Finger crossed.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you everybody for attending this evening. Hope you enjoyed the wines as much as I did, and we hope to see you soon.
Everyone.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Eric. You're a star. Thank you very much indeed. Delicious wines.
Thank you so much. Lovely.